Our final speaker in this panel is distinguished sociologist and journalist Karolina Wigura, who's asking, can the current Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation be authentic if it's motivated by mutual fear of Russia? Having a common adversary can be very convenient.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted I can speak here today. And I would like to start with a description of a cover of a magazine at the end of September 2014, so 12 months after the Ukrainian crisis has started, almost 12 months. On the cover of one of the Polish weeklies, one could see a portrait photograph of Bronisław Wilczstein, a former anti-communist dissident, now a right-wing journalist, famous for his strong way of expressing his views. And on his cheeks were drawn Polish and Ukrainian flags. The caption read, "I am a Pole, thus I help Ukraine." Do Rzeczy, because this is the title of the weekly, is a right-wing periodical known for its controversial covers and expression opposition towards the liberal leftist Gazeta Wyborcza. This time, however, it seems nobody has been shocked. Many Polish journalists and intellectuals, irrespective of their political views, could have been photographs with the same flags and the same caption. Does this mean that the Poles and the Ukrainians have achieved the long-awaited reconciliation? Many observers of the relations between those two nations had such hopes, especially because the process of the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation, which lasted for 25 years after 1989, has delivered as much hope as disappointment, and it was renewed and froze many, many times before. So first, for over a decade after 1989, Warsaw focused to a much greater extent on improving relations with its Western neighbors. More intensive work on relations with Kiev started only in the beginning of the 2000s, but at that time, mutual declarations of repentance and forgiveness, even if festive and high level, did not bring the expected result of a reconciliation similar to the German-Polish process of reconciliation. Why? On one hand, one can say the process of Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation lacked daring statements similar to those that accompanied the Polish-German reconciliation process. Jarosław Krycak has mentioned the famous sentence from the Polish bishop's letter, "We forgive and ask for forgiveness," but regrettably, this sentence has been repeated so much times before that it almost lost its meaning. On the other hand, in the 2000s, there was already public fatigue with solemn declarations of forgiveness and repentance, ritually repeated by politicians, really worldwide. In this context, Paul Ricoeur, a French philosopher, wrote about the theatralization of forgiveness, so a phenomenon that caused the declarations of repentance and forgiveness to be regarded as trivial, even if their actual content and the politicians' intentions were very genuine. So the Orange Revolution at the turn of 2003 and 2004 seemed to be a great breakthrough. Young Poles, especially those belonging to the younger generations, massively declared their support for the democratic Ukraine, and in Kiev, at Maidan, people were shouting not only the name of their president, Juszczenko, but also Haj żywe Polska, long live Poland. The trouble is, after these words of solidarity, the further reconciliation process froze again. So many people hoped after November 2013 that the reconciliation process will be renewed with new Ukrainian Euro revolution. Did it succeed? I think the answer is quite unclear, and I argue this answer sounds this way. Yes, the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation process did move further on in 2013 and 14. It has been based, however, on a very dark passion, mutual fear of Russia, Putin's Russia especially. Can it be authentic this way? In this presentation, I argue that paradoxically, yes. And even more, paradoxically, without fear, authentic political reconciliation is impossible. To examine this, please let me turn to the political passions that have emerged during the Ukrainian crisis in 2013 and 14 in the Polish public debate. In my opinion, it is difficult to overestimate the role of passions in politics, especially nowadays, where the revolution in communication has the effect of globalization of emotions, as German sociologist Ulrich Beck once pointed out. In this presentation, I will talk mainly about the passions on the Polish side, which I know best, of course, and because of the comprehensive query of Polish press debate from November 2013 to November 2014, which I have conducted for the German periodical Valerio. Among the passions, the strongest passions that were revealed by the Poles towards the Ukrainians in those months, two were mostly strong: feeling of brotherhood and solidarity. Both of them had positive but also negative components. Let me start with the positive ones. For many weeks, central buildings in major cities in Warsaw, like for example the Palace of Culture and Science in Warsaw, were illuminated in Ukrainian national colors. When the situation in Kiev became really dramatic at the beginning of 2014, activists of the third sector sent parcels of food, medicines, and warm clothes to Kiev, and Polish hospitals have adopted dozen injured persons from Euromaidan free of charge. Just before the elections to the Euro Parliament in May 2014, a group of candidates for MEP have declared that if they get a mandate in Brussels, they will work in order to commemorate in one of the EP buildings, quote, those who have died in Ukraine for European Union, end of quote. This mood was reflected for many months in the Polish press. In the second half of November, November 2013, many newspapers printed national colors of Ukraine on their pages. Bronisław Komorowski gave an interview to Gazeta Wyborcza where he declared in Ukrainian, "Jeszcze nie wmerła Ukraina," Ukraine has not yet perished. Utterances very similar in tone appear also in other magazines, from the Catholic weekly Tygodnik Powszechny to the liberal leftist weekly Polityka. In January 2014, when the situation in Kiev became dramatic, Bogusław Rabota, editor-in-chief of the center-right daily Rzeczpospolita, wrote, quote, I am pleased that Polish elites are not afraid of responsibility, and I believe that in a situation when tragedy touches our Ukrainian brothers, we as Poles will be able to face this situation. Such mood was also present on the right. I have also already talked about Do Rzeczy, but also this mood was to be found on the left side of the media spectrum. The left-leaning Le Monde Diplomatique, Polish edition, supported the Ukrainian revolution, even though they were very critical towards the Eastern policy of Poland as such. Also, editors of the leftist Krytyka Polityczna stressed that the Ukrainians will never forget Poles if the Poles remain inactive. Łukasz Jasina and Kacper Szulecki, editors of my own weekly, Kultura Liberalna, criticized the insufficient sensitivity of Poles in the following words, quote, the Poles have become so affluent that they forgot about where they were 25 years ago. The memory of our own bad shape is too pale to understand the situation in Kiev, even if it is so easy for us to boast in Brussels that we are going to teach solidarity to our European partners. But the Polish solidarity with Euromaidan was also lined with strong, dark passions. I do not mean a tone of contempt towards the Ukrainian hearers, although it was also present. I can talk more about this, perhaps in the discussion that will follow. But dark passions were more strongly present when it came to Russia. Mutual fear of this country, especially of Putin's Russia, which has revealed its face fully during the winter and spring of 2014, has been strongly visible in Polish press dispute. Calls of brotherhood with the Ukrainians were used more or less consciously as a counterweight to the hated Soviet fraternal help. With every week, more vocabulary reluctant to Moscow appeared in the press publications. So, for example, in November 2013, you could read about Russia, that this is the country that spoiled the Vilnius summit. A couple of weeks later, You could read in the Polish press that Europe must pull Ukraine out of the Russian hands, etc., etc. In the same time, in historical supplements to newspapers and weeklies, one could read extensive articles about dramatic history of Soviet occupation of Poland and Ukraine. In his opus magnum, History, Memory, Forgetting, the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur wrote about the phenomenon of incognito forgiveness. He was referring to situations where big words like forgiveness or brotherhood are just too big to be realized. Perhaps then, he argued, normality is a good alternative. If, for example, a Jew and a Palestinian can hold a simple conversation about selling a merchandise, this is already a great success. Normality, writes Ricoeur, is the incognito of reconciliation. But what if incognito reconciliation occurred between Poles and the Ukrainians not because of daily contacts, but because of a common antipathy, more because of fear of Russia? Isn't it that such pardon is based on an extremely fragile basis? Can forgiveness be based on fear and be authentic? As you remember, the answer that I gave at the beginning of this presentation is yes. Not only such forgiveness can be authentic, but more, fear is a guarantee of its authenticity. To explain this, we will have to think just as a great master of political thinking, Montesquieu, taught us. Politics should not be described as they should look like, but as they do look like. Fear is one of the most powerful political passions, next to other passions like love, brotherhood, solidarity, but also desire to possess, also love of self. The nature of political passions is always confusing and combines the positive with negative, bright with dark. For example, Judith Szklar explains, fear and disgust can bring people to greatest atrocities, but the truth is also that neither morality nor a sense of community could exist without those two negative passions. While the liberals may not like it, human nature is constructed in such a way that negative and dark passions help developing long-term political mobilization. Fear of returning of the atrocities of the past was the passion that lay at the origin of the European project after 1945. You could say in this sense that European Union also is based on the fear of past. And thus, at the origin of the reconciliation and repentance process, which has been launched mostly around the past politics of Nazi Germany, there was also fear. Fear of the past is also something which unites Poles and Ukrainians. And today, as today's Germany brings less negative connotation due to the role of this country in European integration and Eastern policy of European Union, fear of the past in Poland and Ukraine is personified by another country, Russia, especially after the full disclosure of the nature of Putin's regime in 2014. For this reason, fear may not be an obstacle, but a guarantee of authenticity of the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation. But note authenticity, but not necessarily longevity. For the same reason that Jarosław Hrycak had already mentioned after Jerzy Giedroyć, without Russia, any reconciliation between Poland and Ukraine may not last for long. But there is something more. There is one more condition to be fulfilled to make forgiveness authentic and to make forgiveness last long. The condition is called mutual interests. Mutual interests and forgiveness. When the word forgiveness is used, the first associations run towards the original meaning of the term, which is rooted in religious ethics. In religions like Christianity or Judaism, forgiveness is a great and highly demanding virtue. Christian theologians even say that this virtue is so difficult that it is not people, but God that forgives in our souls. This meaning is far from any concept of interests, isn't it? But in the political sphere, interests are indispensable. Forgiveness in Europe after 1945 would not have become political institution if European nations, which declared repentance and forgiveness, had not have common economic and political interests. Does this mean that political reconciliation is only another way of articulating a political game of interests? Cynical game? Not necessarily. It is surely a political game, but this does not preclude authenticity. If the politicians do care for longue durée effects of the political reconciliation, this means especially struggle for a lasting change in public awareness in both nations. For example, supporting student exchanges, joint initiatives of the third sector, common textbooks on history, so everything that has been done in a quite successful process of reconciliation between Poland and Germany. The question which remains, of course, is whether Polish and Ukrainian politicians are able to define common interests. The Polish government has resigned, as you very well know, from a strong pro-Ukrainian course just before Donald Tusk has become the president of European Council. And the upcoming parliamentary elections remain uncertain when it comes to the line of the new government, most probably created by the opposition party, Law and Justice, regarding Ukraine. The Ukrainian politicians, in turn, as it was said by Andrzej Szeptycki, prefer to realize their dream of pushing their country to the West much more often with German than Polish help, even if this was one of the conditions of Vladimir Putin when Germany, France, and Ukraine was going to have the talks. This is not widely understood in Polish society. Thus, the Polish-Ukrainian reconciliation process did move further on with the Euromaidan revolution, but its future is unknown. Thank you very much again.